What did we think overall of the race if we had to try and give it a rating?
I think for Mexico, people, Mexico's not got the greatest rep besides its aesthetics and the stadium and everything else.
Yeah.
The racing itself doesn't necessarily live up to high praise. And I think for what we got this weekend, I think actually I'm going to go 6.5 out of 10. I think it was pretty decent. Maybe being here with you guys is probably what made it bearable, but I don't know. But I think, I'm going to give it a 6 out of 10. There's 6.5 out of 10. There was a bit of action.
There was a few wheel-to-wheel battles.
There's things to talk about.
There was definitely some battles there. This is a race that absolutely reeked last year.
Yeah.
There was like 10 overtakes over the whole race. That obviously, this had a red flag, had 2 restarts, had a lot of good overtakes, and a lot of people recovering through the field. I'll give it a nice little 6.5 out of 10. So I really think it was a decent race. I think the stream was better, guys.
Yeah,
the stream was better.
Yeah, we made it sick. I think that it was above average. It was above average.
I'll give it a 6. I can't give it more than that.
Yeah, I think there was. What I will say is the wheel-to-wheel action that we did have was actually good quality.
Yeah.
Action, mostly. I mean, I don't mean as in driving standards. I mean, it was just like, it was entertaining.
Yeah.
Rather than it wasn't like someone blitzing past someone. It was like 50 stupidly easy DRS overtakes.
Max,
it was like
Max was, but
well,
the rest of them were.
the rest of them were just like actually pretty decent moves for the most part. So yeah, 6.5.
Yeah.
Generous.
And obviously the Mexico City Grand Prix being Sergio Perez's home Grand Prix and qualified, not great. Still a tenth and a half off of Max. Wasn't the end of the world as much as Ricciardo being ahead of him didn't look good. But then into turn 1, 3 wide, 3 don't go into 1. We've had this a few times, haven't we? And, Checo's the one taking the risk. It's a racing incident, but if it's on anyone, it's on him. It's certainly not on Max. He's got the inside. He's just carrying his line. Charles, I don't think he can do too much more. Maybe you could argue he's a little bit drifting away from Max, but Checo's putting himself around the outside. Like he did in Qatar, didn't he? And Checo put himself on the outside and ended up getting caught out, and happened again.
I think it's just definitely home race, a lot of pressure. Getting out qualified by Daniel Ricciardo, he had a fantastic start. Let's give credit for Perez there, that he was even in the conversation.
Yeah, he shouldn't have been there, truthfully. Yeah,
such a good launch, but trying to go 3 wide on that corner, it just showed a little bit of impatience. Trying to go around the outside, he could have just backed out and then just lived another day and just let the race settle out. There was an opportunity here for him to get P2, so just show a little bit of patience. You don't have to get everything in one go. The fact that you started from so far behind, you've already cleared signs, and the other people around you, you just have to show a little bit of patience.
It felt
I felt like maybe there was a little pressure. Listen, he saw the cake. He was like, I'm going to eat this cake.
Yeah.
P1 around the corner, the crowd's going to go wild.
Yeah.
But then he ended up getting flipped
like
a pancake, and then the race was done for him.
Yeah. It kind of I think it was like a split second sort of thing of, I'm at home, driving to Mexico, Mexican fans are here to see me, whatever, and I've got a sick start. And I could, if I make this move around the outside, I'm in the lead.
Yeah.
I'm in the same car as Max. I might win here. It was a very sort of like all or nothing. Like, I don't care about finishing second behind Max. I want to win, bro.
It's a tough track to overtake. So
it is.
You can understand where that thought process might come from.
Yeah, definitely. It makes sense. It's just that you've just got, you can't, if you looked at his trajectory as he was arriving at the corner, he was literally almost on the racing line. Yeah. It's like, bro, you've got 2 cars on your inside. Not even just one. Something has got to, you've got to at least start turning in a little bit later than that.
Yeah, I think you guys have all said great points regarding this. I think as well, Ricciardo out qualifying him is one thing. He's at his home Grand Prix. I think even just for the season that Checo's had, he could just do with some time off. You know what I mean? The season could not end quicker. And it's now that he had this opportunity to actually go ahead and overtake both Ferraris, his name was in headlights type of thing. All of a sudden, it's it's such a silly mistake, and I don't think it's a Checo-like mistake either. And so it's almost like with everything added in terms of it being in Mexico, overtaking those Ferraris, even ditching Danny Ricciardo very early doors as well, it was right there for you. I mean, there's a running theme in this race where if people were just patient, your move will get done. You ain't got to sort of go too early or anything like that. And we'll talk about it from the other positions. But yeah, it's such a shame. I was heartbroken to see Checo out so early.
His home race, man. That's why it was sad, really.
And again, I think it's the contrast between Max, who started P3. Remember, he didn't start on the front row, and he positioned his car like perfectly on the inside, turn one. Like that's the difference. I know it's easy to say in like hindsight, but like Max doesn't get caught up in those kind of instances, even when he is starting further back, like a little bit further back.
He positioned himself the best he could ever possibly position himself in that situation.
100%.
And I mean, last podcast we were talking about the gap Hamilton Perez, and this was before the disqualification, and we were talking about a 19-point gap. Well, obviously Lewis got disqualified, so that gap jumped back up, but now the gap is 20 points. So if Lewis hadn't got disqualified, it would be 1 point.
God.
If Lewis hadn't got disqualified.
Pressure is getting worse for Checo right now.
Yeah.
And for him to not get P2. You spoke about it last week, didn't you?
Yeah. We literally were just like biggest war crime. Like it's the fact that, again, we said it last week, like it's the Red Bull's dominant car, but it's not the first dominant car in Formula One history. It's one of the first dominant cars, though, where everyone else behind is like level playing field. So it's not like you've even got a Fernando Alonso and a Ferrari who's sweeping up consistently, like with Mark Webber. Mark Webber finishing third in the dominant Red Bull wasn't as bad because it was like, at least it was only one guy who was picking up points.
Even last year weren't that bad because of
Leclerc. Exactly. Yeah. Leclerc was in the title fight at one point, so it's calm. Whereas this season, it's just been domination from the start. Aston Martin were the second best car on the grid. They just doubled DNF'd 17th and 18th today, having been at the back the entire time. Mercedes were kind of in there. Ferrari the same. McLaren are now there. If you don't finish second in this championship, it's crazy. I just feel like he needs a couple second places. Yeah. A couple, just literally 2 weekends back to back where he finishes second in the race and he's been within like 4/10 of max. Just to get some level of confidence, because he is just overdriving at every possible opportunity right now.
But this was the track that he's meant to be like. I know. Mansell famously said like, "Oh, you gain a second at home." Like obviously, you know, in qualifying he was a 10th and a half off of Max. Like that's a much closer gap than we've seen for I think a long time. Like
Not too bad.
Really,
What the guy in between,
well, that's the problem, innit? Like
the person that's possibly replacing him.
the guy in between who, you know, P7 in the end for Ricardo.
Yeah. Could have been more. But also still incredible for AlphaTauri.
Incredible.
You know, truly, given the situation they're in, you know, for
It's hard to talk about Perez and not talk about Ricardo and vice versa, right? Because I think their stories are... Daniel is in that seat because he wants to get into the Red Bull as soon as possible. If Ricardo can do enough to prove that he is... And we talked about this during the stream, Pete, right?
Yeah.
Like, there's one school of thought, which is like this gap Perez to Verstappen is fine because there's a clear 1-2. You could argue the same at Aston Martin, Alonso, Stroll, clear 1-2. Don't have to worry about tripping over each other. They're too close, it's an issue. But there is a point where the gap between teammates and, like you said in the stream as well, like, you know, you can't back up your teammate, you can't play those tactical games that if you've got two cars up there, you can. Red Bull have to assume everyone's going to catch up. They have to assume everyone's going to catch up and prepare as such. It's 2 full years of these new regs. Mercedes and Ferrari and McLaren should be closer next year. Should, on paper. We'll see. It's up to them. You can't facilitate that in the rules. But is this gap, like, it's just so painful to watch. And I don't know how this can carry on for any longer because it's just every single week we're talking about Perez because it's so bad.
I definitely believe that if Perez was a Red Bull racing driver, they would have put him in AlphaTauri already. But they don't have that type of control over him. That contract that he's probably got is solid, saying that he can't move to other teams. Contract. We need to know he's probably got some high fees if you want to cancel it early, all this type of stuff, that a lot of financial stuff that they don't want to really commit to. And maybe we've heard of a lot of conflict between Helmut Marko and Horner at the moment in the background, even though on the face of it, they're looking like it's all chummy, but maybe they're arguing over that situation. Or why did we give them renewal after that Monaco win?